This is William, hopefully your favorite videographer from Two Heads Publishing. Welcome to the College Complex, the focus group with the opinionated people looking for the truth. Come join us and separate the wheat from the chaff and have a great time doing it.
Welcome to the College of Complexes. This is our 262nd meeting since we started in February of 2009. We put a speaker on every week, a different subject. We require our speaker to take a position on an issue or express a point of view. They have to be for or against something. We don't care what it is. We give the speaker an hour to make a presentation. If they go over an hour, we cut them off. If anybody interrupts the speaker, remind the interrupter that we only listen to one fool at a time. That's one of our rules. And we have question and answers from the audience, not speeches. Then we have remarks, rebuttals. Everybody in the audience that wants who gets 5 minutes at this podium to respond to what the speaker said for or against. The speaker gets the last word, gets a comment, and close the meeting. That's how it works. But before we put our speaker on, now's the time for announcements. If there's any announcements, anybody have any announcements they want to make? No? I guess not. Jim, you got any announcements?
No, that's in the cap.
Okay. Well, anyway, I have one, but the owner of this restaurant called me during the week and was upset that we're not staying in the room here. Well, she asked that we stay in the room and so on. So I said we would, and I suggested, which is on our, and she was saying people weren't paying for their meals. There's no one here right now that was in that category, but they weren't buying meals. They were coming in, sitting down, and not doing anything. Anyway, I've had on here since we started tuition $3 and $5 food or drink purchase. Now in Chicago, the waitresses go around and they say, if you're not going to order anything, I'm going to charge you $5. That's what they do. So I told her that's what you should have our waitresses do here. You know, and they're going to do it. So anyway, that'll solve that problem. Hopefully. Now we're leaving the doors open tonight because there's no one out here, and there's no heat back here that I can notice. The heat's coming from the rest of the restaurant. I don't know why the heat isn't coming out here, but if we close these doors, we're going to freeze to death. So we might as well leave them open. Anyway, I had to say that. Next week, March 7th, come on in. No sitting out there. I know. All right. March 7th, we have corruption in the multi-level marketing industry versus Amway within the Republican Party. That's E. Robert Smith. He's going to talk about that. March 14th, why Democrats lost the 2014 midterm elections and what to do to win future elections. That's Calvin Bulett. He's a regular here. He'll be our speaker. On March 21st, we have Larry Duncan. He's the board president of Dallas County Schools. He's going to talk about, it's a school district with no students and no teachers. He's discussed current expanding programs to the future outlook of Dallas County Schools. That'll be interesting. And Ray Correa, he's sitting here tonight someplace. There he is. He's going to talk on March 28th about strategies of the political left. He's a regular active participant to discuss how his opinion the primary goal of the left is to fundamentally change America. Anyway, he raises several questions. You can look on the itinerary there, it's there. So, anyway, our speaker tonight is Willard Mac Smith. He's a PhD. He's going to discuss personal philanthropy, how the average person can be a philanthropist. He will examine why we give, how to give the most bang for the buck, and what we can give besides money that will have a major impact on people's lives. Plus, he'll show what's in for you. Anyway, without further ado, please give a very, very, very warm welcome to Mac Smith.
Get through the tangle of wires here.
There you go.
It's like the trenches of World War I suppose. Yeah, I think so. Everyone hear me? I guess if I have to be for something, I'm for philanthropy, and I'm for making it personal as opposed to just writing a check to the March of Dimes and forgetting about it. I think you ought to be personally involved in what you give if you can. About a year ago, I was in the Family Place thrift store, and they were selling this book. I don't know, I paid $2 or $3 for it. It's called Give Smart. And I thought, well, that's a good idea. So I got it and I read it, and it says philanthropy that gets results. What I found out as I read it was that it's written for people who have a lot more money than I do. The last half of it, they were talking about how you set up your foundation and picked your board and the executive director, and how you got advice from people who were interested and found grantees. But the first half of it was more practical. And there was some irony to that, because basically this is a result of philanthropy. Someone gave it to the Family Place, which sells it and collects money for abused women. But they define philanthropy as a desire to promote the welfare of others, expressed especially by the generous donation of money to good causes. Well, not all of us can donate generous amounts of money, but we all have something we can give, and most of us do. And there's no mention in the definition of philanthropy about how much money you have to give to a good cause. But the authors talk about clarifying what you want to do before you start giving your money away. And that's true whether you give away a lot of money or a little bit of money. And they suggest that you ask yourself 4 questions. One is, what are my values and beliefs? And is my giving advancing those values? What is success, and how can it be achieved? It could be that you're giving either time or money to a cause that you believe in, and you need to think about how do I apply my resources to get a successful outcome. There's probably nothing less satisfying than sinking a lot of money into something and then have it die on the vine. And instead of feeling like a philanthropist, you begin to feel a little like a fool. Another question is, what am I accountable for? Meaning, what am I committing to put into this in the way of time and resources? And what will it take to get the job done? Have I got enough resources and influence to get the job done? So basically, it's sort of a values clarification thing in the first 4 chapters. So you might ask yourself, why do you give? I think most of us do. And I'll suggest some reasons. Probably the number one is for religious reasons. You know, the Old Testament talks about giving a tithe, 1/10 of your income. The Mormon Church calls for 1/10. Islam takes a different approach. They want 2.5% of your assets, as opposed to 10% of your income as a minimum. Now, I don't know that all Muslims give 2.5% of their assets, but that's the expectation of the religion. And then you get into questions, well, does it all have to go to the church, or does the rest of your charitable giving count? Would some of your taxes count for charity? I spend a lot of money on school taxes every year, and I don't have any kids in the school. Is that charity, or is that just taxes? A lot of our income tax goes to charitable work. There's a big chunk of the federal budget that is health, education, and welfare. There may be other reasons for giving. One of them just keeping up with the neighbors. You know, I want to give about what everybody else gives. Maybe sharing your good fortune. You may have a windfall. If you won the lottery, you'd probably give a lot more to charity than you would otherwise. And sometimes there are material rewards. Really rich people get substantial tax benefits from giving money away. And then there's recognition. You know, if you give away enough money, you get your name carved up on the side of a building, like the Margot Perot building up at Presbyterian, or the Margaret Hunt Hill Bridge. You can get your money, get your name on a building for less than that, because generally if you go into a public place like the Meyerson or something like that, you'll find a plaque that says this was made possible by the generous donations of, and they start out with the diamond donors for 100,000 or more, and the gold for 50, and the platinum for 50, and the gold for 25, and on down to people who gave $5,000 or $10,000 and got their, as part of the, you know, there's some satisfaction in making the gift, but there's a little bit of reward for it in getting there. If you go to a symphony, the program we'll list donors that sponsored and what have you. And, it just makes you feel good to give things to worthy causes. I'll tell you one other reason you might consider. Years ago, I used to be in the construction business, and I built a sewage treatment plant in a little town north of Houston. And I hired a guy, a local man, to come out and put up some chain link fence. And when he got through, I said, if you'll give me your invoice, well, I'll take it up to Dallas this weekend and I'll get you a check in the mail Monday. And he said, well, I don't really need money all that bad. He said, he was about 60, I guess. And he said, I retired when I was 40. And he said, I realized it was a mistake. He said, everybody I knew was working, so I couldn't talk to them during the day. There were a lot of housewives available, but I felt like I'd get myself in trouble if I did that. And I tried going to bars, and that wasn't a real pleasant experience. So I started a business. And he said, I didn't need money, so as I got it, I mostly gave it away. And what I found was the more I gave away, the more I got. Now that is the message of Robert Tilton in reverse. Tilton says, you send me money and God will bless you. Well, I don't know whether you get any kind of blessing for sending money to Robert Tilton, but here was a guy who was practicing that he was giving money away, and he was testifying that, yeah, God was blessing him, the money was coming back. So you can take that story for what it's worth, but it made an impression on me. How much should you give? There's the tithe we talked about, and I know people that do that. I have some cousins. They are ranchers down in South Texas, and they are land rich and money poor. They never have had much money. Well, in the last couple of years, the worm has turned. And that is that they are part of the big oil boom down there. And one of them, for his first royalty check, got a check for $2.5 million. Now, they all belong to the Christine Baptist Church, which has at most 100 members. And they've tithed all their lives. And this little dirt poor church that is no bigger than this building here, and probably not as well appointed, is, if they continue their practice, is going to suddenly become extremely wealthy per capita. Kind of an interesting thing to contemplate. Yeah, I have another cousin who we had a discussion one time about whether you should tithe your gross pay or your net pay, and he felt like you ought to tithe the gross. At any rate, John Wesley said you should earn all you can, save all you can, give all you can. Some people say you should give till it feels good. Some say you should give till it hurts. I suppose if you're a masochist, that's one and the same. You should give enough to accomplish your purpose. If you're one of these philanthropists that's trying to make something big happen, you want to be sure that you fund it well enough. And I will tell you, there's no right answer to those questions. That's a matter of what's in your heart. But it's something you might want to contemplate. There's a parable in the Bible where Jesus was in the synagogue and people were putting money in the plate. The rich people up front, they were throwing in substantial amounts of money, and when it got back to an old lady in the back, she put in a penny. And they asked him who gave the most, and he said it was the old lady in the back. He said the rest of you gave what you had to spare, and said she gave all she had. So another question is, what do you hope to accomplish with giving? Sometimes it's just general good. I get stuff in the mail all the time. They want a contribution to the March of Dimes or the Alzheimer's Foundation or this and that and what have you. And, it's tempting just to write a check and you figure, well, I'm doing some good and they're doing good. If you're an investor, before you get enough money together to buy stocks directly, well, you invest in a mutual fund. And in essence, United Way is like that. They've checked out which charities are worthy of getting funds and do good things with it. And in a sense, that's what it amounts to. You write a check to United Way and you figure, well, they're going to give it to somebody that'll make good use of it. But I think it's better to, if you can, to help someone you know. All of us know people that can use some help. There may be a relative who would go to college if you had a little bit of money for tuition, and sometimes a little money can make a big difference. you know, if you want to be more ambitious, you can think about improving the school system. You know, it'd be tough to do the whole thing, but you know, you might, a lot of parents will get together and get supplies or audiovisual equipment or something like that for a room. You know, some people build hospitals. You know, I mentioned the Margot Perot wing of Presbyterian. Some want to find a cure for a disease. You know that Bill Gates, and he has a lot of money at his disposal, is wanting to eradicate polio. Not cure it, but eradicate it. You know, in our human history, we have eradicated smallpox. It's gone. And that is Bill Gates' ambition, is to get rid of polio. Now, he has a lot of money, but he doesn't have enough money to do that by himself, so he's going to leverage that. You know, he's going to countries and saying, you know, here's how you can get rid of polio in your country, and this is what I will give to get that started. And it'll be interesting to see, but you know, he's a smart man, and he's probably thought about, can he really accomplish that, and he's working at it. In terms of things you can give, you know, a lot of us have personal assets. Some people will their estate or their house to a church or charity when they die. Boone Pickens carries that pretty far. He says that when he dies, that every nickel he has is going to charity. And he has a lot of money. I think Warren Buffett has that same philosophy. He has given about as much as he intends to his children, and he's given a lot to charity, most of it to the Gates Foundation, and he intends that when he dies that it'll all go to charity. He and Bill Gates are trying to get billionaires they know to donate $1 billion to their charity. And their pitch is if you've already got several $1 billion, what is the utility of having one more? Can't spend it. You know, one thing is you can leverage your gifts. I used to have an employer who, if you gave money to a charity, he would match it. They would match it. I think that's getting to be less and less fashionable, but at the same time, you hear now and then on PBS that, well, you know, we have a donor who will match all the gifts we get the next week, and so you can leverage things that way. There are ways that you can increase what you can give by being savvy about taxes. You know, most of us have, I'll give you a tip about that, most of us have a personal exemption that unless you're buying a house and paying interest, it's pretty hard to itemize and get up to that personal exemption. But, you know, you can pay your property taxes either at the end of the year or the beginning of the year. And to give you an idea about that, this year, we paid our property taxes for this year after the 1st. At the end of the year, when we get our property taxes for next year, we'll pay it before the end of the year. So those two add together in itemizing. And we lump up our charitable giving that way so that there's more of a tax deduction. You can itemize every other year to get a tax deduction. And that's, you know, that's significant in terms of, you know, you add about 30% to what you can give for what you get up over your personal deduction. Another thing you can give is your time. You know, we all have time. We all have things we know how to do. And I had an aunt, and still have her. Her belief was that she would tithe her money and she would tithe her time. If she was working 40 hours a week, she ought to spend 4 hours a week doing good things for people. And she lived that. And, you know, if you were sick, she'd bring you a meal or come by to see how you were doing. If you were shut in, she'd come by and visit. If you didn't have a car and you needed a ride to the store, she would come and do that for you. And it was a very nice thing to do. I have a friend that I grew up with down in South Texas named Jerry Davidson. Jerry, later in life, became he went to work for the county as a business development officer. And we're talking about a small county, Atascosa County, south of San Antonio. And one of his dreams was to get a community college built down there because kids in that area that wanted to go to community college had to drive all the way to San Antonio, about 50 miles each way. And he worked on that for, I guess, 10 years. And he didn't have a lot of money, but he knew a lot of people, and he had some influence in that score. He didn't hold any political office, but over that period of time, he eventually managed to get a community college built down there. And he did that with his time and what he knew and that sort of thing. It didn't take him a lot of money to do that, but he made a significant difference in his community by doing that. And it really wasn't part of his job description. He just had that dream and he started working toward it and eventually made it happen. And there is a corollary to that. Somewhere along that line, he asked me, I owned about 30 acres of land down there in an adjoining town, and I didn't really have much use for it. I was able to rent it out to a farmer for just about enough to pay the taxes. And he said, well, would you be willing to give that to the community college to help fund it? And I said, yeah, I would do that. So there wasn't much economic activity going on in Jordan, Texas at that time. Before I could sell that land, Jerry had got his community college built. And then one day he called me and he said, I found a buyer for your land. And so I sold it. And he didn't say anything about it, but I remembered what I promised him. So I took that money, and instead of giving it to the community college, I put it in a brokerage account. And I invested it in stocks that paid about a 4 or 5% dividend, and it was about $100,000. So after I took out 15% for taxes, I put 85 in there, and I figured, well, that'd get me about $3,000 a year in dividends. And I would donate that to fund a scholarship because a year's tuition is about $2,500. And I've been doing that for about 3 years now. And I do what I told you about taxes. This year, I made my contribution for the tuition right after the first of the year, and at the end of the year, I'll do it just before the end, so those two become deductible. And there's still one more little trick there, in that the income from that, because it's dividends, is capital gain that's taxed at 15%. And the gift comes out of ordinary income, and I get a 30% deduction. So, if you think about that, you can leverage things like that to lessen the bite or enable you to give more. What kind of things can you give? Well, obviously you can give money, and you can give your time, you can give your knowledge. I belong to a group called Engineers Without Borders. And I'm not very active in it because the group does not spend much time thinking about the things that these folks tell you that you ought to. They're always looking for a project in the mountains of Bolivia that's hard to get to. And the idea is that they need technical expertise down there, but the problem is you're so far away it's hard to know what the problem is. And it costs so much to get there that the good you can do is pretty much wiped out by that, and so consequently they spend a lot of time planning outlandish trips and never get anything done. It's a good concept, and there's Doctors Without Borders who go down and treat people, and that is really a wonderful thing. And there may be other chapters of Engineers Without Borders that are more sensibly oriented. These guys, they think, well, we ought to go down there and not only design it but do all the work. Physical work. And I'm thinking, well, it doesn't make a lot of sense to import labor into a country that has very low wages and high unemployment. Better to supervise it. And another thing you can give is empathy. When you make a personal gift to somebody, it's like a Christmas gift. You buy a gift, you don't send them money. And what it says is I care about you. And that means a lot. When you go visit someone who's shut in and can't get out, that means a lot more than sending them a check for $10. And that they recently convicted the guy that shot the American sniper. He said, I shot him because they wouldn't talk to me. They put him in the back of the truck and they were driving there. And if one of those two guys had turned around and said, hey buddy, how's it going? They might both be alive today. And a lot of people need some understanding, and it's important to give that. And Bill Gates doesn't give that. He gives money, but he doesn't give understanding, and you don't get the feeling that Bill Gates cares about you. And at the same time, he doesn't get the feeling from the people that he gives to that they care much about him. So, that's what I mean by personal philanthropy, is, you ought to make it personal. One of the other questions you should ask yourself is, can you achieve your goals? If you want to do something, do you have enough money to do it? Do you have enough knowledge to do it? Do you have enough time to do it? And do you have enough influence to make things happen? And, just to write a check to United Way is not what we're talking about. But if you wanted to change Dallas schools, you may be like my friend Jerry Davidson. It may be, if you're persistent enough and you've got enough good ideas, that you could do that you could make that happen, even though you didn't have much money. Sometimes if you're politically active, you have enough influence to make things like that happen. At any rate, the things that these guys said you could consider is, why do you give? What do you hope to accomplish? Can you achieve your goals? And what are you going to get out of it? Are you going to get satisfaction? Are you going to get a name on a building? Or what is it that you want that keeps you going? Because I was a scoutmaster at one time, and I went to some kind of training, and the guy who was doing the training said, well, you have to make it fun for the leaders, because if you don't, they won't do it. And that's the truth. You have to feel like that you're doing something worthwhile and getting something out of what you're given, to give you the incentive to keep doing that. So that's all I've got to say. As Forrest Gump said, that's all I've got to say about that. Okay, all right. I don't know much, so make it easy.
Who wants to be first? Okay.
Excuse me. There is an organization that tracks and reports on, I guess investigates and tracks different organizations and reports on what percentage of their gifts, how it's used. Where can I find that information?
I wish I knew.
I've read about it, but I don't remember where they said. And it was really interesting, because it's like what the proportion that the American Heart Association, what they use in actual service of, their mission, versus what they get used in administration, and then what they use to have big parties. and that's the kind of thing that I was really curious. And I know United Way is one that's been scrutinized in the past for taking more toward their administration than actual.
Yeah.
That's a real important thing to me. I want to know that whatever I give gets right there to the mission.
I think most of them have a goal of, they want to give about 80% of what they collect. Now, United Way keeps 20%, gives away 80, but they give it to another organization that spends 20 on administration. So it keeps getting diluted the further you go down. And, the 80% is just the fundraising activity. The administration of it, the employees and that sort of thing, eat up a lot more. And, it would be good to know that, and it's hard to know because, sometimes they say, well, we pass on 80% when it's, 80% covers the advertising and the fundraising, but there's another 20% for writing the checks and keeping track of who gets it and that sort of thing. So it is kind of astounding. My wife worked as a temporary employee for the March of Dimes one time, and she was quite disappointed in the percentage that actually got shipped out, and appalled by how much was spent on raising funds. And that if somebody sends you something in the mail soliciting funds and you write a check, your reward is to get another letter asking for more. That's just guaranteed. And my wife generally replies that if you won't ask me until next year, I will send you something next year. And that's unfortunate, but that's true. And if you look at the federal government and welfare programs, I think if you look at what goes in at the top as health, education, and welfare, and what comes out at the bottom as a check to a recipient, that's a pretty small number as well. That's unfortunate, but that's true. It is it's not a real efficient process. You had a question?
Really, I don't. I have a partial answer for her question.
Oh, good.
Not-for-profit organizations are required to file federal returns if their income is above a certain amount. And if they do file those returns, they're also required to keep a return available for the public. And so I don't think they're obligated to give you a copy. But if you care enough to go to their place of business, they can give you a copy. Now, the reports that they give are bifurcated into three areas as far as their expenses are concerned. One is the administrative expense of running the organization. The other is the amount that they spend to raise their funds. The third item is what they spend for their projects, what their missions are. And if you really have a particular organization you're concerned about, you can see that. Now, I know that in some cases that when they seek out, major contributions from say some company, the companies will ask them what those percentages are. And I have been in public places before where I'll pick up maybe a financial statement or something like that. I think the last time I did this was when I was maybe in Minnesota visiting a relative, and I was at the hospital, and we had a brochure there. And they spelled out those things. Now, having being an auditor as well as a tax person, I've done those, and I'm not so sure that they're not required to be audited. So I'm not sure how accurate those amounts would be, but that would be a place to start.
Thank you.
Here we go. I often give money to people who stand on corners with signs that say work for food or a woman, and it could be in front of the bus station in different places. And it's kind of something I saw as a child growing up, where my grandmother always gave money to, mostly they were like refugees after World War II, would come to our back step. And I always saw her open her pocketbook and give them money. And one day I was driving with my grandchildren, and I handed $1, and they both thought that was the most wonderful giving thing that I could do. So I know a lot of people don't like to give money to people on the streets, but I'm one that does. So that's what I was going to say.
That's a good thing. Scott Burns had a column here not long ago, and he was talking about when he was a child that he was with his father or his grandfather, and he said they were coming out of a restaurant, and a guy hit him up, and he says, "Say, buddy, could you give me a nickel for a cup of coffee?" And obviously this was a long time ago. And he said his father reached in his pocket and he gave him 50 cents. And he said, "Well, why did you give him 50 cents? He said he didn't want a cup of coffee. He said, "Well, what do you want?" He said he wanted a drink. And you might be appalled at doing that, but his father said, well, he said, he was an old man, and he said he needed something to help him get through the day. That's what he had funded. He said you could buy a half pint of whiskey for 50 cents in those days or something like that. And different people have different needs, I suppose. I sometimes give money to people on the street, and I always tell them, well, I'm going to give you $1 or $2, but I'm going to preach to you. And I tell them, life's a lot easier if you lose your bad habits and you go to work. That you don't have to live like this and wonder where your next meal's coming from. All you have to do is get a job. And some of them look at me like, yeah, and walk off. And some of them kind of retreat like you were sprinkling holy water on a vampire or something. But, a guy told me once, he said, there comes a point in a person's life when he's ready to receive wisdom. And it said, until then, there's no point in telling him. And I think, well, I might happen to be there at the right time. And if I spent $1,000 and only one of them bore fruit, it's well worth the investment. So, that's another way to look at it. Yes, sir.
I was watching a program one time, and it was a young man who was the dean or president or whatever of a small college.
Mm-hmm.
And the discussion was the rising cost of education for students.
Mm-hmm.
And how in the world are we going to meet all these costs, and so many students can't afford it, and so forth. And then he started talking about the president of a larger university that he knew of. And he said, and that man gets $1 million a year as his salary. And then they said, the reporter asked, well, what is your salary at this small college? Well, mine's only $400,000. So, I'm also have read kind of scandalous things about various of these well-known organizations that are supposed to be out there helping people who consume most of their money paying their own salaries.
Yeah.
Or paying for their trips here and there to entertain potential donors at this country club or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a lot of wasted money.
Mm-hmm.
Has there been much really of an effort to look into this and expose it?
I don't know. Don't know. That was kind of the question that you had asked, and I expect that there's kind of a tradition about how much money you can keep, and they tend not to throw stones at each other for fear to break the glass house.
Yeah, hello. This is more of a comment. We tend to be reasonably charitable, but what we will do is try to find out what the top guy in the charity actually gets. Mm-hmm. And so basically, we never pay for any out-of-state charity. We always fund local charities that we know we've actually visited and stuff like that. My wife and I worked at Xerox, and a lot of people came that we knew, to get printing done and stuff like that. So we personally knew a lot of these people, and we give money to them. But I think, as you say, if you give something to the American Cancer Fund or American Heart Fund, you'll get 5,000 begging letters the next day.
Yeah.
And you do wonder, and you look at the top of what these guys are making, and you say, look, this is not something that's is reasonable, really. When they're making like $200,000-$300,000 to be head of this charity and that charity, it just doesn't seem right. So we just don't do it, or we just say, okay, so there are good things in Dallas, and I think there's plenty of need in Dallas locally, and I think everyone should look around locally, and as people know, I have lots of real estate. People complain, well, you have different prices, sure. I'll charge depending on the age and what they're getting. So if it's a poor family, they pay half, and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. So because I don't typically need a lot, but so it really is best to focus on people that you know are genuine, who need it, and then give it and give it away if you can. So
I think personal philanthropy is a lot better than impersonal. And if you know someone who needs it and you can meet those needs, well then you know what the overhead is there.
Any other questions? No questions. I can't believe this. All right. You get to sit down.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, now it's your turn to talk. So, who wants to be first? It's got to be a first. Want to be first? If you get to talk.
Well, I, Tom, agree with your wife. This was a very good topic, and it was an uplifting topic for us to have, as opposed to a lot of the negative topics. Some months ago, I pulled up to a filling station one night and filled up my tank. And there was this black man who came up to me, and he was driving a nice modern SUV. And he just seemed so desperate. And he said, I live in Denton, and I forgot my wallet when I left today, and I don't have enough gas to get home. Well, I, thought about all the possibilities of that. But it could have been true. And so I looked in my wallet, and the smallest bill I had was a $20 bill, and I handed it to him. And he just absolutely insisted I write down my name, and I said, no, this is a gift to you. Don't worry about that. And so he thanked me, and then he filled his tank and left. And then a young lady over there at another pump had been watching, eavesdropping on us. And she gave me a very glowing compliment, and it really kind of made my evening. It was so nice the way that she said that. And I began thinking about that, and I think that the personal gifts are often much more effective. I would never give anything to any medically oriented activity at all, because the FDA, being driven by the pharmaceutical industry, will not allow cures. And there are dozens of cancer cures out there that have worked for thousands of people, and yet they're all stamped out. You can't even use the word cure. So I would never touch any of that. But I think the next individual, if it's not just on the street and there's not time, if I have the time to talk to him, I will hold that bill and I will say, now, there are conditions to this. Oh, what are those? You have to give me a promise. Actually, you have to give me your word of honor, which is more than a promise to me. This is a bond between you and your Creator, who keeps perfect records. That as soon as you are able, you will find someone else who has a need, and you will do something for them. Maybe it's an old lady who needs a ride to the supermarket or whatever, or needs her lawn mowed so she won't get a ticket, or a child that needs some help. Now, I said if we do this one and one and one and one, pretty soon somebody's not going to do it. So we've had no effect at all upon life. But if we do 2, 4, 8, or 3, 9, 27, or even 100, 10,000, a million. So here's my next promise I'm requiring of you as your word of honor, that you will do this every time that you can, and you will strive for 100 at least in your life. And you will require these same promises from everyone to whom you give something. And I think it should also be expressed to this person, if they're not thinking about it themselves, that if you were to try to give this back to me, it wouldn't be a gift anymore, and you would be depriving me of the good feeling I'm having, giving it to you when you need it. That thing about giving ye shall receive, what goes around comes around, is just a universal law regardless of church affiliation or anything like that. If you have read the book The Secret or watched the DVD, what you hold in your heart and in your mind is what you project into your own future. And so when we see people in life, what do we think about them? Are we critical? Are we enforcing a negative thing we see? Or do we try to look beyond what appears to be and see that individual created by God? Do we do that? Do we try to look to the truth about a person rather than the mask of what they may be believing about themselves even? I'll give you an example of this. A friend of mine one time pulled up to a bowling alley, and he got out of his car, and accidentally his car door bumped the side of a pickup truck. And there are a group of guys in the back of the pickup truck drinking beer and chatting, and boy, they jumped out of that pickup truck angry as heck at him, and they were ready to beat him up. And he just very quickly refused to see that as part of them and saw who they truly are, regardless of what they're thinking right now. And he held on to that. And that conversation very quickly turned around to their saying, "Oh, you didn't do any damage, buddy. Go in and have a good time." We have more power in what we hold in our hearts and our minds, and the images that we see, regardless of what's being projected at us, that we can make changes in this world individually And I think, sir, you are very right that the individual efforts are the most powerful. And we have individually so much more ability to do good than we ever recognize, and I think in most cases. And there was one other little thing I wanted to say. Can't think of it. Maybe I will later. But thank you. It was good to see you.
Okay, who's next? There's got to be a next. Ha ha!
Well, this is more on the lines of a joke. I was chatting to a bunch of young people as I do, and so this girl said, "Well, my father's very religious. He goes to church, this particular church, every Sunday, and he gives a lot." And I said, "Oh, I suppose he drives a Cadillac." And she said, "Oh no, he drives a Mercedes, and his wife does too."
Okay.
Who's next? We got next? Come on up here.
This is at the end of the video, so it won't be hard to remove if my boss has a fit over this. But since we've had several agencies of nonprofits mentioned, I thought I'd go to one of my favorites, which was KNON Radio, a community radio station. And I don't know if any of you know this or not, but on Christmas Day, the Grinch visited KNON. And before that, I have a theory exactly what was the really cause, but some squirrel someplace ate into a cable that took our signal to the tower. And for about 4 or 5 days, the transmitter cooled along with the antenna because it wasn't having the 50,000 watts put out. We got that fixed after about 3 or 4 days, and we got back up, and then it went out again. And the bottom line is, I think what it was is after 30 years of our use of our antenna, it finally burned out. And we were down for about a week. The FCC was breathing down poor KNON's neck. You have 7 days to get this thing fixed. Fortunately, a previous engineer died, and we got a new group. And he brought some people in from another part of the United States, flew them in, and they took that antenna apart and washed it all down, put in new cabling, borrowed some stuff that we have to replace. The bottom line is, if we've got any philanthropists that are looking here, KNON is not in our budget, but it costs us roughly $1,000 a year to keep that antenna running. So we got a $30,000 bill we got to try and pay for. So that's my promo, and it wasn't built into the this last pledge drive. I don't know if it will ever will. The KNON management is doing their best trying to find donors or whatnot. I will suggest a donor way, and you can get yourself a plaque for it. But we could just get anybody to donate $1,000 to KNON. Your pledge item will be a wall plaque. On a wall on there, we can put anything. We've had people dedicate these wall plaques to friends, family, and to people who don't live anymore. So here's my plug for KNON. If you got $1,000 to KNON, get yourself a wall plaque. It will stay on that wall until KNON no longer exists. So and we're working on that because. Theoretically, we found out we're going to have to move because the building we're in is up for sale. So within the next year and a half, we're going to have to pick up stakes and rewire us another studio, and I'm sure that expenses are not in any budget either. So we're going. Questions? Go ahead.
You know what would be nice? I enjoy your parties and your fundraisers. Maybe every week.
Okay, let's make this official. There we go.
Maybe every week you could do an announcement, like, the kind of activities you might have coming up. Like I've gone to a lot of your parties that are a lot of fun. Maybe you could do that.
Well, as far as I know, we do have promos, but I'll double check that
Yeah.
with a good old chaos there.
I've gone to like Poor David Pub for a fundraiser. That, you know, it's really fun.
Yeah, well, all our events are fundraisers to try and
Yeah.
keep the doors open.
Right.
And there's 150, I hope no one gets mad if I left somebody out, volunteers that keep that station, they get paid absolutely zero, keep that station open 24 hours a day. There's no one gets, only 4 people get paid. That's the bookkeeper, the engineer, and I don't know if the salesman get paid. I think they may have a commission. And Chaos, of course, he's the front man. But there's only 4 people at KNON that actually get a paycheck, and it's probably something not to write home about either. So I'm going to leave you all. There's my plug for KNON. If you have an idea for a program, submit it to KNON. You might end up on the air, and I might be your engineer. All right. Thank you, nice folks.
Well, I had 2 little more comments, and you just spurred one. Why be so quick to blame the squirrels? Are you sure it wasn't a raccoon? And that can be applied to a lot of things in life. I just wanted to share with you a poem that I wrote some years ago because the topic brings it up. It's called Watching Cars Go By, if I can remember the whole thing. He sits beside the road and watches cars go by. A strong physique, a square-cut jaw, a handsome man for sure. His uniform is clean and pressed. He represents his peers. Where's the rest of it go? With chin held high, his pride still burns. The medals prove he's brave. The kind of man they send out front to fight the wars they plan. Old Uncle Sam, a heart of gold, whose men are pocket change. To spend them here and throw them there and bring them home in parts. Penny pensions. Old Sam says, thanks, but now you must retire. To what? And how? His dreams shattered. His sweetheart slipped away. Can't find a job or pay the rent, so now he looks to you. His deep, sad eyes can pierce your soul and make his story yours. Began as boy, became young man. But now, the bane of war. With chin held high, his pride still burns. I wonder for how long, sitting by the road, watching cars go by.
Yeah. I announced this earlier. We have to, all the meetings, I'll tell you later. Anyway, any more speakers? Anybody else wants something to say? Oh, you get the,
I get the last word.
you get the last word, yes.
It's not a rebuttal.
No, you get to comment all the comments that are made, and you get the last word. Oh, you want something to say?
What are we speaking about?
Whatever you want to talk about.
You might, people don't know about tipping.
All right. All right, I'll pass on. Is it okay? Anyway, during the week, the owner of this restaurant called me, and they want us all in here instead of out there because we were bothering other people, I think. And so they said they'd add tables, which they have, and that we have enough space. They want everything contained in here. Also, she was complaining that people were not ordering food, when they came in. And I said, and I said, on our itinerary, we had listed that if it's tuition's $3 or you charge $5 for food. I said, so I suggested that she tell the waitresses that what they do in Chicago, and that is that they tell the people that if you don't order something, we're going to charge you $5. So That's what we did. So, anyway, that's that. He's leaving? All right. Well, anyway. I thought I'd pass that on. Yeah, anyway, I hate to say these things, but that's how it is, you know, So anyway, I guess we're out of speakers. It seems that way. So I'm the last speaker. You want to be the last speaker?
What was discussed before?
Here's our speaker. Philanthropy. Philanthropy, yes. Giving. Giving to others.
Give me a moment. I mean, I just...
You've got a moment.
Your moment's up.
Sure, go ahead.
But come in here and sit.
Bill Gates was mentioned. I am not a fan of that man. You can go on YouTube and find him lecturing on the need for eugenics, for cutting back the population on this planet. And if you will go to Wikipedia and look up the Georgia Guidestones, you will see that the elitists who run this world, and by golly they're there, intend to cut this population of the world back to a sustainable under 500 million. There's a lot of this stuff going on, and I think everyone here needs to at least look at a lecture of Mark Passio. Listen to that on YouTube, because he was into Satanism with the Satan Church of America and learned a lot from it, got disgusted with it and left because it violates the fundamental laws of the universe of morality. And he's spending his life lecturing on it, pointing out how virtually all of our leaders worldwide are secretly and fervently into Satanism. And what it causes is, he says that maybe 3 or 4% of the population are genetically psychopathic. But in Satanism, they fervently teach that anyone who is unaware, which is most of us, are the walking dead. And those who are unaware but not doing anything about it are also the walking dead, and they have all of us, have no more value than animated clay. So no matter what degree of pain and suffering they cause to however many millions, it's nothing, they're just clay. And that's why we have all of these people perpetrating these things in getting us off to these wars and so forth. I was just reading in, Veterans Today, that they were pointing out how Iraq just shot down 2 UK transport planes that had been parachuting supplies to ISIS. That is a function of the UK, the United States, and Israel, and the European Union to keep the whole Middle East totally torn up. Well, these people have to be psychopathic to do this. Those leaders in our government and in these other governments are that way. And we need to all wake up to that. Mark Passio, watch some of this stuff. And, when you go to project those good thoughts about people, those are the lost sheep on this earth by all means. And they're the ones who need the most prayer and the most love if they are ever to see the light of day. I mean, they think we are animated clay. I think the absolute reverse is the case. They are spiritually absolutely lost. But we have to realize these things for it to be exposed, for ever a change to be made to it.
Well, Tom, I'll certainly give it a try here. Being late never stopped me from having something to say. Maybe once, maybe twice, but not the rest of the time. Philanthropy. There used to be mutual aid societies. We've lost that. We've given so much over to government to do, and it's really not a really workable equation there, because government programs take so much of they take just so much input for the amount of output that they get. And many of the organizations also are very poor that way. I know Red Cross has come under censure, and some of the other organizations as well. I don't remember about United Way, but if you can find a good charity, I think Salvation Army actually is a very good charity, and actually a high percentage of money contributed goes out to help people. Philanthropy really makes the world turn in terms of humanity. When you have no philanthropy, it's not a world you want to live in. It's really amazing how even a little bit of kindness, a little bit of contribution. I try to keep a dollar or two for the bum on the corner, and sometimes the guys will hold up and say, yes, it is for beer. God bless, Bubba, whatever. That I'm not there to judge, but these people, they have their hand out. I've traveled in other parts of the world, and beggars are just a part of life in other parts of the world. I don't know why the city of Dallas has all these restrictions on people here. Yeah, they have a ban on feeding them, which is absolutely insane. That's what many people need most of all, and so it's some kind of equation. There seems to be a metaphysical principle. If I have great need, this actually works. Maybe not all the time, but it certainly worked for me in miraculous fashion. If I have a great need, something I really can't meet, if I find someone who has a smaller need that I can meet for them, and this sounds counterintuitive, if I give them money that I figure I really don't have, maybe I've got other things I need to pay, it's really strange how this Rubik's Cube universe we live in just kind of cranks over a few turns or something, and all of a sudden there's money coming to me. And I think that there's some kind of principle there that is really worthy of study. I think we need to get back to philanthropy on the individual level, on the family level, on the community level, through church organizations and so forth. When you start giving philanthropy over to government, that's where it begins not to work. And I guess that's all I've got to say.
Well said.
Okay, I think we're out of speakers. So that means that I'm the last one standing. But I really don't have much to say. I just want to thank I think our speaker did a great job here tonight. He got us all thinking. And I said, I appreciate he was here. I'm a little cold here tonight, but what are we going to do? And I'm glad you're all here. Anyway, I'm going to give this back to our speaker. He gets the last word, and we get to hear from him.
I've got two things to say. One of them is I retired at the first of the year, and I resolved that I was going to, there's a lot wrong with America, and that I was going to spend some of my time trying to straighten that out, and which may make you wonder about whether I considered was my goal achievable. And I was wondering about that myself, and as I was cleaning out my desk down in Florida, I came across this little medallion, and I'd got it at a church in Panama City, Florida about 6-8 years ago. And I looked at it, and it's got a little inscription on it, and you can't see it, but it says, "With God, all things are possible." So we'll see about that. The other is a story I want to tell you. And when I was a little boy, there was an older lady that lived next door to me in Jordanton, Texas. And she told me a story one time that she had been a school teacher back in the 1930s, back before I was born. And she had had a parent-teacher conference in a little rural school somewhere. And she was coming back down the old two-lane dirt or gravel road at the time, and she had a flat. It's the middle of the night. She's way out in rural Texas, miles from anywhere. But she was wondering what she was going to do, and another car came along and stopped. And said this man wearing a suit got out, and he changed her tire. And she offered to pay him, and he wouldn't take anything. And she said, well, I want to thank you very much. Said, my name is Opal Brooks. And he shook her hand. He said, my name is Pat Neff. He was governor of the state of Texas.
Well, that's it for tonight. We have to be out of here by 9 o'clock, and we generally retire down to Starbucks at the corner, and our speaker is welcome to come there. We'll buy him some coffee. If you want to come down there, you're more than welcome anyway. All right. So that's it for tonight. Thank you so much for coming and being our speaker. Appreciate it.
This is William, hopefully your favorite videographer from Two Hats Publishing. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like it, please leave comments below, or like, follow, or subscribe to us and get notices of all our videos. We love it, even when you call.